What is inaccurate about that story? If there's anything that is actually inaccurate about it?
It's a totally false attack based on an old recycled news story. I'm not going to sit and go through every single line of a very boring 14,000-word story.
And the president's lawyer said that the allegations of fraud and tax evasion are 100% false and highly defamatory. The authors of the Times report are Suzanne Craig, Russ Butner, and David Barstow. Barstow is here with us. David joined the Times in 1999, then its investigative unit in 2002. He's the recipient of 3 Polk Awards, the Goldsmith Prize, the DuPont Silver Baton, the Daniel Pearl Award for investigative reporting, 2 Sigma Delta Chi Awards for distinguished service, a Peabody Award, and is a 3-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Just so they know who we're talking about. David, it's nice of you to come.
That was a little much, but
well,
thanks.
it's there on your bio. How did all of this begin? It's my understanding that the investigation itself actually started with a couple of documents on a colleague's desk.
My colleague Sue Craig went to her mailbox one day, and there was an envelope, and inside that envelope were a couple of pages from President Trump's 1995 tax return. We reported on those documents in the run-up to the election, but it was information that was kind of stunning to us that was in those documents, which was that the president in 1995 showed that he had lost over $900 million. And it was one of those moments. There's a lot we actually don't know about President Trump than Donald Trump, candidate Trump, and his history with money. And so that was really the beginning of us. Let's dig deeper. Let's any layers of this onion as we possibly can.
At one point during the article, Viz Quote 1, you write, over time, as Donald Trump careened from one financial disaster to the next, his father found ways to give him substantially more money, records show. Even so, in 1990, according to previously secret depositions, Mr. Trump tried to have his father's will rewritten in a way that Fred Trump, alarmed and angered, feared could result in his empire being used to bail out his son's failing businesses.
Yeah, it was. That was a huge surprising find for us, because what we were seeing was that Fred Trump, through starting when Donald Trump was 3 years old and moving forward, had been endlessly creative in coming up with new ways to get money into Donald Trump's pocket. So he didn't just pay him to be like on his payroll, but he also paid him to be his purchasing agent. He paid him to be his property manager. He paid him to be his consultant. He even gave him the laundry revenue from the buildings. And yet, even after this incredible generosity from Fred Trump to Donald Trump, there comes this moment that we discover in our reporting that there was one line that was sort of too far even for Fred Trump. And it was when Fred Trump discovered that Donald Trump had hired lawyers to rewrite a portion of his will in a way that at least Fred Trump perceived could put his entire empire at risk. It would have given Donald Trump so much control over the empire that Fred Trump at least believed it would have allowed him to use everything that he had built for 70 years to bail out Donald Trump's own failing businesses. At that point in time, Donald Trump was in really big trouble in the casino industry.
The totality of the report indicates that President Trump, then Donald Trump, citizen, was not at all a great businessman, that he squandered many millions and hundreds of millions of dollars, that his father bailed him out, and the necessary taxes were never paid because they fiddled with the numbers.
At one point, Donald Trump owed his dad $15 million. And they were trying to figure out, what do we do about this? And if Fred Trump had simply said, okay, that debt is forgiven, Donald Trump actually would have owed income taxes on canceled debt. Instead, they found this other maneuver. It involved one of Donald Trump's buildings, Trump Palace. And what they did was they exchanged the debt that Donald Trump owed his father, and instead Donald Trump gave his dad a portion of the building. And a few years later, Fred Trump sold the portion back to Donald, but this time for $10,000, which is effectively a $15 million gift. That's what it turned out to when you did the math. And we could see
a gift on which no one paid taxes.
A gift on which no one paid taxes and was unreported. And what you could see is this pattern over and over again when Donald Trump got himself into trouble or when Donald Trump was taking on some big new project. We can actually see in the tax returns and the banking records that we obtained that Fred Trump's financial support would increase significantly as this kind of safety net underneath Donald Trump.
How does the Times find this and the IRS never flagged this?
I think in part it has to do with the way the IRS looks at tax returns. I mean, they're looking at a particular year. They're looking at a particular year's transactions. What we were looking at actually was a much broader period of time. And we were also recognizing in the reporting that we're doing and in the sources that we're talking to and in the documents we were seeing that the Trumps were playing a long game. They had a very well thought out strategy of how to avoid or in some cases evade huge amounts of gift and inheritance taxes. And so when the IRS would look at something and they'd say, well, you owe us a couple $1 million more, right? And the Trumps would say, great, that's fine. Knowing that by paying a few $1 million more here and there, they were getting away with not paying hundreds of millions of dollars on the real estate assets that Fred Trump was transferring to his kids.
The president says this is an old, tired, boring story. His lawyers say there's nothing to it. That it's a hit piece by the, quote, failing New York Times.
So you can search every story ever written about Donald Trump and every book written about Donald Trump and every TV interview done by Donald Trump, and you will never see any mention anywhere in any of those things of a little company called All County Building Supply and Maintenance. And this is the company that the Trumps set up for the purpose of siphoning cash out of Fred Trump's empire without paying gift or estate taxes. So this is not an old story. This is a very new story.
And the reaction from those in New York State has suggested an investigation may begin. Got any new tax documents? The whole world's looking for them.
You know, one of the things that this story taught me, at least, at the end of in the reporting for this story, we ultimately were able to put our hands on about 200 tax returns from inside the Trump. And we'll be looking.
I'm sure you will. David Barstow from the New York Times. Thank you for coming today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
The news continues. Bottom of the hour, top of the news, right after this.